lesson on OCI Identity and Access Management Service. We also call it as OCI Iam. In this lesson, we will look at the core constructs of this particular service, including authentication, authorization, and also we will look at the IAM components like identity domains, compartments, users, groups, policies, and many more. So let's get started. So what is OCI Iam? It is a cloud-native service that provides identity and access management features. And if you look at it, it has two major components, identity and access management. The first part is identity, which ensures the authentication. It can be inbound, outbound, or SSO. So basically, it provides complete identity lifecycle management. It can also integrate with the existing identity stores, external identity providers, and applications to provide secure and easy access for end user. And the second part, access management of OCI Iam, offers fine-grained access control, or we also call it as role-based access control, where we define granular permissions using policies, like what actions users, groups, or services can perform on OCI resources. In simple terms, it lets you control who has access to what cloud resources, where the first part is about identities and the second part is about access management using policies that act as a control mechanism. When a user tries to perform an action on resources, OCI Iam checks the associated policies to see if the user is allowed to perform actions or not. So moving ahead, we will understand authentication and authorization in connection with OCI Iam. Authentication, also sometimes called as Auth-N. It is a security mechanism that ensures only authenticated users or entities are granted access to cloud resources. We deal with this process on daily basis. Like when you go to a particular website and it will ask you to enter the username and password to access some content, you are being first authenticated to ensure you are a valid user and allowed to access the content or not. In the same way, OCI Iam provides various methods of authentication of identity, like providing valid credentials to prove the identity of the entity requesting access, along with the user credentials like username, password, or passwordless authentication. Another common method is API keys. So when you are making API calls, whether you are using SDK or CLI, you can use the API keys, which is basically public-private key pair, to sign and authenticate these API calls. Also, the tokens obtained via OAuth 2.0 can be used for authentication and authorization, allowing applications to access resources on users' behalf. Next, with the instance principle, compute instance can securely access OCI resources without the need of having credentials like username and password. And with federated identity, we allow the users to authenticate using external identity providers that supports the SAML 2.0 protocol. And multi-factor authentication can be added on top, providing extra layer of security. All these mechanisms can be used for authentication and decide who as an identity is allowed to access OCI resources. After authentication, we have authorization. In OCI Iam, the authorization is done using IAM policies, where it ensures that only authorized entities can access and manipulate resources based on predefined policies and permissions. For example, let's say we have OCI tenancy with the resources such as compute instance, object storage, and database. Our first process will be user authentication, where identities will be confirmed, and once the identities are confirmed, the system will set user permissions and policies to determine what actions they can perform. For example, user A have permissions to start, stop, and terminate compute instance. User B have permission only to read storage bucket, and user C have full permission to manage or modify database. Now suppose user A tries to stop a compute instance, the authorization process will check if they have the required permissions or not. And if they do, the action is authorized and the command is executed. And now if user B tries to delete the storage bucket, the authorization process will deny the action because user do not have the necessary permissions. So now you must have got it. In OCI Iam, we use policies that define the permissions granted to users, groups, or other entities. And these policies are defined using a simple syntax that we will see in the subsequent lessons. Now in the case of OCI Iam, there are several components. And while we are covering the whole module, we will be dealing with each of them in separate lessons, like users, groups, identity domains, principals, dynamic groups, compartments, etc. etc. For now, let us look at few of them at very high level, starting with identity domain. They are basically container for your users, groups, and application. So let's say you have a set of users for production team and set of users for development team. Now you can separate them using logical container known as identity domain. And then we have this concept of compartments. That is also basically a logical container to isolate and secure your resources in OCI tenancy. And then we will take users, groups and policies and see how they work in practice in a use case of role-based access control. Well, what we do first is we create an identity domain. Then we create users and groups within that identity domain. And then we write policies to provide permissions to those groups. And policies are scoped down to tenancy or compartment. And of course, all our resources are available within compartment, where policy defines what permissions are set for resources in a compartment or tenancy. So this is how the whole service works, where identity domains help you to manage authentication and complete identity lifecycle management. And with the policy, you can define authorization, where you can provide granular or role-based access control. So to summarize, we got to know about OCI IAM core concepts using authentication and authorization. In authentication, we confirm who is allowed to access cloud resources. And we do authorization using policies to control access to the cloud resources. We also looked at various OCI components, and we will be dealing with each of them in following lessons. Thanks for your time and happy learning. This lesson on OCI IAM identity domain. In this lesson, we will get to know what is identity domain and its core capabilities. So let's get started. First, let us look at what is identity domain. An identity domain simply represents user population in OCI and their associated configurations and security settings. It is like a self-contained identity and access management service that can be used to handle or address various IAM use cases, where each domain is like a container for managing users, roles, federation, and provisioning users from other directories. It also provides secure application integration through SSO, that is single sign-on, and secure authentication using SAML and OAuth protocols. Now, as you can see in the graphics here, within the identity and access management service, we have this concept of identity domain, which is like a container, or you can think of it as a metadata that allows you to easily manage users, groups, dynamic groups, and also allow you to secure applications using OAuth, federation, and then allow you to enable multi-factor authentication and configure adaptive security. With identity domain, you can configure user provisioning and import users from Active Directory using the AD bridge component, or from any other directory using the provisioning bridge. It also allows you to configure PAM and Radius proxy application from an identity domain. And also you can configure app gateways for applications that do not support OAuth and SAML protocol. And if you notice that an identity domain is a resource in OCI. Therefore, like any other resource, you can write policies for it and scope your domain to a particular compartment. Now let us look at few use cases for identity domain. Like suppose you might create an identity domain to manage employee access across your cloud and on-premises applications. That will help you to simplify authentication and authorization for various applications. Next, suppose you want another identity domain to provide access to supply chain and ordering system for business partners. So this isolated domain can have its own set of user population, authentication, and access policies. And now suppose you go ahead and create third identity domain to manage consumer identities and their access to public-facing applications. This allows you to have separate domain for consumer users and configure authentication settings for such end users accessing your public-facing application. Next, identity domain also offers identity store and lifecycle management, where you can onboard users from your console, API, or CLI interface, along with the features such as self-service registration or automated account provisioning, and it also allows you to synchronize accounts across your cloud and on-premises applications. And as I said, you can use directory integrations. If you prefer to manage users from an external identity source, for example, Microsoft Active Directory, IAM can synchronize your users, groups between external directory and from your identity domain. It also supports the delegated authentication between the AD and IAM. Along with that, you can add applications to your identity domain from the application catalog, which has around 400 plus pre-configured templates for many popular applications. You can also add applications using standard protocols such as SAML or OpenID Connect or using our proxy gateways and bridges that extend to SaaS, PaaS, or any enterprise application, whether it is on premises or hosted in the cloud. Then on top of that, to increase the secure access to the applications and OCI resources, you can enable controls such as single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and adaptive security. For example, you can use various MFA methods to enable stronger identity verification, such as emails or mobile application passcodes, security questions for passwords alone, or even you can go passwordless. Now, after knowing the features of the identity domain, let us see the core capabilities of OCI IAM with identity domains. We have 4 key capabilities of OCI IAM. That is the inbound authentication and SSO, the identity store and lifecycle management, then the outbound authentication and the SSO, and then OCI authorization using access policies. Now let us go ahead and take a look at each of them, starting with inbound authentication and SSO. This capability is all about how users are authenticated into the service. So it offers various methods including social logon and the federated logons for the organizations that want to leverage the Active Directory without moving the AD credentials into the cloud service. It also supports delegated authentication between the AD and IAM using AD bridge component. Then on top of that, to increase secure access to the resources and applications, you can enable multi-factor authentication and the adaptive security. Now moving to the second core functionality, that is identity store and lifecycle management. This is all about how you manage bringing or onboarding the users from different systems to the OCI IAM. It has several features to do that. One is using bridges like AD bridge and provisioning bridge, or you can also use console, CLI or API options for onboarding users. And then we also have this application catalog where you can use several applications listed over there. Using all these functionalities, you can manage user roles, group membership, assigning permissions, provisioning and deprovisioning of the account, automating the synchronization, and setting up the security policies. And then we have the outbound authentication and SSO. After we know who the user is and what permissions they have, we can enable single sign-on to the target application. So the target application here can be your SaaS application, or it can be your enterprise application, or your Linux host, or it can be your VPN client as well. And the last capability, using IAM policies, you can manage access to OCI resources like compute, storage, or networking. So this last capability is all about managing authorization using IAM policy component. So to summarize, we have seen 4 core capabilities of OCI IAM: inbound authentication, outbound authentication, identity lifecycle management, access policy control, and the protocols that IAM supports. So basically now you got to know identity domain is a logical container that allows you to manage users, roles, security settings, and application integrations. And this isolated domain environment allows you to have different configurations for authentication, access policies, and security settings to match the unique needs of different projects, teams, and business units. So I hope you got to know the core concept of identity domain. Thanks for your time. See you again. Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we will have a very high-level understanding of identity domain types and the features and limits associated with each domain type. So before we start, I will request you to refer the official documentation for more and latest information on what is included in each domain and what are the related limits of each domain type. So let's start with the free domain type. So now when you create an OCI account, it includes an identity domain by default. It is called a default identity domain. And this allows customer to manage access to all OCI resources. So if you do not want to create anything additional or do not need any integration of applications, you can always use the free default identity domain type. It supports various authentication methods, but there is a limit of 2000 users. So this type is not suitable for setting up enterprise level workforce access management. Moving on to the Oracle apps. This type is actually tied up with a few of the Oracle service teams. For example, if you purchase any of the Oracle SaaS, PaaS or GBU application or the VBCS, then this domain type comes tied up with those services. So this is something the customer cannot select or create on the console, as this type is associated with the service teams. But you can select on console Oracle App Premium that supports hybrid IAM scenarios, including proxies, gateways, and bridges, which extend the IAM service to on-premises or OCI hosted Oracle applications, such as Oracle e-business, PeopleSoft, or database, and so on. So basically, this domain type is specifically for Oracle applications. that allows you to use on-premises environment and manage identities in the cloud. Also, you can add non-Oracle applications, but there is a limit of adding only 6 of them. And next, with Premium, you will get all the fully loaded instance with all features and no restrictions. And also, limits on number of users, groups or applications are set high to support enterprise level requirements. This type is compatible with hybrid scenarios, so whatever you are running on premises are all supported. So if you want to have Oracle as your identity and access manager provider, then you can set up this identity domain type. And then the final domain type is known as external user. And the idea is to use this for non-employees and consumer use cases. So if you have contractors and you want to give them access, or if you have a consumer application that can scale to large number of users and want to manage their identities, you can use external user domain type. And as you can see, it supports features such as social logon, self-service, password management, and so on. And it also supports hybrid features. So to wrap up, as we have discussed, when you provision your account, you get a default identity domain with the free domain type assigned. But if you need additional users or integration of Oracle and non-Oracle applications, you can switch from free domain type to premium or external users based on your specific requirements. And you know there are restrictions associated with each domain type, so please read the official documentation. Thanks for your time. Happy learning. And I am a senior OCI instructor with OU. In this module on managing OCI IAM identity domain, we will go over how to set up an identity domain along with IAM components like users, groups, compartment, and policies. We are going to start by understanding the default domain, which is already available when you create an OCI tenancy. Then we will look at creating additional identity domain. Next, we will see how to create and manage groups as well as dynamic groups. Then, how to onboard users using console and other import option. Following the creation of user and groups, we will look at the role of IAM policies in defining permission and access control. So in this module, we will follow the workflow. First, setting up the identity domain, then creating and adding users to the group, and finally using policies to set permission. This module will help you in setting up the key OCI IAM components. So let's get started. Welcome back to this lesson on default domain. When you create an OCI tenancy, your first identity domain, known as default domain, is created by default. And as we know, an identity domain is a container to store and manage users and their roles, as well as to federate and provision users and keep application integration secure using SSO or protocols like SAML or OAuth. And as you can see, this default domain has been created in the root compartment of your tenancy. And you can use it for any users, groups, or application that you want to create or integrate in the root compartment of your tenancy. There are few important points that you should know about the default domain. First, because it is created with the tenancy setup, you cannot deactivate or delete it. Next, you cannot hide the default domain option from the sign-in page. And it always replicates to all regions to which the tenancy is subscribed. And then, in your default domain, you have one user and two groups already created. They are all domain user and administrator groups. Your admin or your super user is a part of administrator group. This group cannot be deleted and it must always contain at least one user. In addition, you will have a policy in your tenancy that gives admin group access to all OCI cloud resources. So this particular policy cannot be updated or deleted. And please make a note that any additional user added to this admin group will have full access to all the OCI services. And then your default admin user is the first IAM user for your tenancy and will be responsible for initially setting up additional administrators to manage your tenancy. And then there are some do's and don'ts for your administrator user, such as assigning roles to manage users, groups, application, system configuration, and security settings. Also need to perform delegated administration by assigning users to different administrative roles and domains, like domain administrator or security administrator. Need to enable multi-factor authentication, configure MFA setting, and other authentication factors. Admin user also can create self-registration profiles to manage different set of users, and also need to look at approvals of the policies and different application. But you should always avoid adding more users to the admin group or using admin or super user account for managing day-to-day routine tasks. Instead, separate IAM users with appropriate permissions for specific roles and responsibilities should be created and used. And instead of having all the users and group in a root compartment or in this default domain, using multiple identity domain can help you maintain the isolation of the users and administrative control. So to wrap up, it was a quick lesson on default domain and some do's and don'ts related to admin account. In the following lesson, we will see how we can create multiple identity domains in your tenancy. Thanks for your time. See you again. Welcome to this lesson on creating identity domain, where we will discuss why we need to create multiple identity domains if we have default domain, and then followed by a demo to know the process of how to create them. First, we will understand why we need multiple domains, like for isolation of administrative control, where multiple domains allow for isolation of identities, which is important in complex cloud environment. They serve as container, separating different teams or departments and preventing unauthorized access or interference between them. As you can see in this example, we have separate domain for production and development with their own set of users and integrated applications associated with domains. And as we all know, different departments may need different access permissions to deal with data or resources. So different set of security policies, access control, and compliance can be applied to each domain separately, ensuring data security and regulatory compliance. Like production domain users will have different set of security settings compared to development domain users. It also simplifies identity management. Like multiple domains provide a structured way to organize and manage our identities, making it easier to oversee and maintain large-scale organization. Think of it as having different folders on your computer desktop to keep your files organized. And with multiple domains, you can go granular for administrative control. Each domain can have its own set of administrators responsible for managing users, application, and security policies. This flexibility is essential for large organization. And then when you create an identity domain, it will create one default administrator group as well as one admin user. That admin is your domain administrator, and that admin can manage users, groups, or applications in your domain, as well as they can assign administrative roles to different users, like security admin or application admin for handling application integration, and so on. Also, admin can configure multi-factor authentication setting along with password or signing policies associated with identities. Admin can also create self-registration profiles to manage consumer users or different set of consumer groups. One important point that you should note related to region is that when you create identity domain, the selected region in the console becomes the domain home region. For example, if the selected region in the console is US East Ashburn and you go ahead and create identity domain, then Ashburn region is set as this identity domain's home region. And unlike the default domain, additional domains are not by default replicated to all subscribed region of your tenancy. So if users in this identity domain need to interact with the OCI resources in other regions, you must first enable replication for the domains. So with this quick lesson, we got to know why we need to create multiple identity domains and about admin user that get created along with domain creation. Also, we need to take care of home region while creating domain and enable replication if required. So in the following demo, we will see domain creation process in action. Thanks for your time. See you in the demo. Welcome to the demo of creating an identity domain. Let us consider a use case where we have a subscribed OCI tenancy. By default, we get default domain. Now suppose you need additional domains to manage your production and development teams' identities separately. To do this, we need to start by creating dedicated compartment for each team or domain to ensure isolation. Then we will create identity domains, one for production and one for development, with a domain admin to manage each domain. So let us go to the console and deploy this use case step by step. So the first thing I do here is I log in into my account. And this is my account name. I click next here and it will bring me to the login screen. And if you notice here, the identity domain, it is telling me that I am going to log in to a default domain. But once we create additional domains, we can select which domain to log in for managing users, groups, SSO, federation, and advanced IAM capabilities for that domain. For now, I will enter my default domain admin credentials, that is username and password, and click sign in. So now we are on the console. From the main menu, I will click on identity and security and then select domains under identity. In domains, you will see default domain, which is in active state, where you can manage users, groups, dynamic groups, application, or in security, you can manage sign-in policy, MFA, or adaptive security, and more advanced IAM capabilities. We'll cover them in detail in upcoming lessons. For now, we will focus on creating identity domains. So as per our use case, we need dedicated compartment for both domains. So let's start by creating production compartment. So I go back to compartments, click create compartment, provide the name as production, add some information, and click create compartment. I will also quickly create development compartment. Create compartment, development, and click create compartment. Now we have two compartments, production and development. Now let's go back to domain to create an identity domain. First, we need to select the compartment where our domain will be placed. That is production in this case, and click create domain. Provide domain name, that is production or production team. Select the domain type as free for now, and you can change it later according to your requirement. Next, create a domain admin by providing name and required email address. Then confirm the compartment and click create domain. It will take few seconds and domain will be created. Similarly, we can create development domain. Once the domains are active, you will receive an email to configure password for domain admin. For that, open your provided mailbox and click activate account. Then it will ask you to set a password for domain admin, like production identity domain in this case. This password policy that you see here can be configured as per your requirement. We'll see how to configure password policy and impose them on identities in upcoming lesson. For now, just set a password. Click reset password. Once done, click on continue sign in. Now you need to re-log in using updated password. Select your domain and enter username and password and click sign in. First time it will take you to the profile page where you can update your profile information, or you can skip this step and access OCI console from the profile menu by clicking OCI console. As per the default sign-in policy, you need to enable secure verification method for your account. So click enable secure verification, and for this demo, I will set up mobile app as second factor. You can also configure other methods by referring to documentation. For mobile app, you need to download mobile authenticator and scan the QR code. Once that is done, your device becomes the second factor for authentication. I have already installed mobile authenticator on my device, and I will scan the QR code and it will add my device as a second method for authentication. So now every time you log in, you need to enter the passcode or allow login from the mobile app as a second authentication factor. And then you will be on the console. And if you check the login user is the domain admin for production admin domain. You can also verify it from domain admin group. Go to identity and security, domains, select production as your current domain, go to groups, and you can see under domain administrator group, you have your username. Similarly, we can configure development domain admin. So that was a quick demo on creating identity domain, where we got to know how to create an identity domain with a domain admin. I hope you found this demo useful. Thanks for your time. This lesson on managing groups, where we will discuss groups as an IAM component, why we need them, and also about default groups in your domain, followed by a demo of how to create them. So group as an IAM component are collection of users who have common roles, permissions, and access policy. Like we have network admin group for users responsible for managing network in your tenancy. Similarly, we can create groups for users handling instances or certificate management. It also helps us to simplify the management of access to resources by allowing you to grant permissions to a group of users instead of individual user. And also group make it easier to track and audit who has access to specific resources, which is required for security and compliance purposes, where you can see which group have access to resources, making it easier to identify potential security risk. Now let's see how to leverage groups in your domain. After creating an identity domain, we have domain admin who can create groups aligned to your organization structure and access requirement. For example, we can have group like engineering, marketing, or finance. Then once these groups are in place, the domain admin can add users to these groups as per their roles. This ensures that users with similar responsibilities are grouped together. And then we can set permissions using policies. Like we can define what users in each group can do. Well, we will learn more about policies and users in upcoming lesson. For now, let us focus on groups. So we can create groups as per our requirements. But by default, we have two groups created by IAM in each domain. They are all domain users and domain administrators. Talking about domain administrator, during domain creation, if you create an admin user for identity domain, that admin is added to domain administrator group. This group cannot be deleted and we need at least one user in this group. And also be careful because any user added to this group will have full control over the capabilities of that identity domain. Next, we have all identity domain. This group is automatically assigned when a new user is created and it does not appear in the groups tab. All newly created users are by default part of this group. So if you assign this group to any of your application, all users in this group can access those applications. So make a note of it. Since this group is created by IAM and not by the administrator, you cannot delete it. Beyond these default groups, you can create additional groups as required. Now let's dive into a demo on how to create groups in the console. So see you in a demo. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the demo on creating groups. We will continue with the same use case where we created two identity domains, production and development. Now we will create two groups in production domain. One called network admin for users managing networks and vault admin for those handling keys in the OCI tenancy. So let's go to the console and see this in action. I'll first enter my tenancy name and then I will select the domain production. And then I will enter my production domain admin credentials and click sign in. Now we are on the console. We can confirm our login from the profile and then I will go to the main menu, identity and security and click domains. As you can see, you are a domain admin for production domain. So you do not have access to default domain. Even you do not have access to read compartments, as we have not set any permission for this particular user till now. So as a production domain admin, you can only access the capabilities of production domain. So I select your domain and to create groups, we go to groups. And you can see default groups are already available as we have discussed in theory lesson. Now you can click create group and then enter the name network admin. For now, we are not adding any users to this particular group, but you have an option to add existing users to the group while creating it. Now click create group and done. The group is now created. I'll quickly create one more group Vault admin. Click create group and done. And so we have created two groups as per our use case. Moving ahead with the same use case, we will see how to add users and set permissions for those groups in upcoming demos. So this was a quick demo where you got to know how to create groups. And remember, it is a good practice to create a group first as per the roles in your organization and then add users to the group. Thanks for your time and see you in the next lesson. Managing users in Oci Iam. Here we will dive into the different stages of user lifecycle and understand who can manage users and explore various methods for onboarding users. So let's get started. First, we need to understand the user lifecycle, starting with non-existent stage, where user profile is not yet created. Now consider that HR in your organization want a user profile for new hire. So you go ahead and create user account and move that user to activated stage. You can also create a user and keep that particular user in a deactivated stage if the joining date is of later dates. Once the user is in the activated stage, they have active access to OCI resources and application based on their associated permissions. In this phase, you can modify user permissions or change their assigned group. Suppose a particular user job role has been changed. Or you can also assign or remove the admin role privileges for that particular user. And if a particular user goes on sabbatical leave, or if you want to restrict the access to the OCI resources for a certain period of time, so we can move that particular user to deactivated stage. User in the deactivated stage cannot sign in or use OCI resources. You always have an option to reactivate the account to get their access back. Now consider a scenario where user retires or leaves the company. In this case, the user account is deleted and all groups, application and admin role privileges associated with their account are revoked as a part of the workflow. So now you got to know the life cycle of the user. Now we will go ahead and see who can manage or create users. First is your tenancy admin, who has permission to manage all the resources in your tenancy. So he can manage users, groups, and all related identity components in your tenancy. Second is your domain admin, who is a part of domain admin group and can manage all the capabilities of that particular domain, including users and groups. Then domain admin can also assign administrator roles to a particular user, such as user manager admin role. Now this user can also manage users and groups within that domain. And we will see this in more detail. And the last one, you can assign permission to any user using policies. So the user who has permission to manage users can create them. Like for example, policy admin assign user and group management permission by writing policy like allow group and the group name to manage users in tenancy. For now, don't worry about the policy syntax and how we write the policy. We will learn and explore more about writing policies and syntax in upcoming lessons. For now, you can just understand it as a policy that allow any user who is a part of this particular group to have permission to manage users in entire tenancy. So you got to know who can create or manage users in your tenancy or in a particular domain. Now we will see how you can onboard users. So we have several ways to onboard users to Oci Iam. You can quickly create users using OCI console or API option. And if you are dealing with large number of users and groups, then you can use CSV import option in the console. And for the use case where you need self-service capabilities for consumer users, you can use IAM self-registration option. But what if I want to bring the users from external sources? You can bring them to IAM using automation in several ways, depending on the use case. You can use methods like app catalog to bring users from the applications like Oracle SCM, that is Human Capital Management, or Oracle Unified Directory and Oracle Internet Directory. Or you can use SCIM APIs or cross-domain identity management and user lifecycle. Additionally, IAM provides the Active Directory Bridge and Provisioning Bridge software component that customer can install locally on-prem to sync and provision users to OCI IAM. And to import users as a part of federation, you can use just-in-time provisioning. So to wrap up, in this lesson, we covered the different stages of user lifecycle and then who can create or manage users and the various methods available for onboarding users. In the next lesson, we have a demo to see some of these methods in action. Thanks for your time. See you again. Welcome back. In this demo on creating users in OCI IAM, we will use the same use case where we have two domains, production and development, within our tenancy. Then in the production domain, we created two groups, network admin and vault admin. Now in this demo, we will create three users, one using console and adding it to the network admin group, and two more users using the CSV import option and adding one of them to network admin group and the second user to vault admin group. So let us go to the console and see this in action. Now I am logged in as production domain admin user, which means I have permission to access resources or capabilities within the production domain. So I can create users, groups, manage application or do the security configuration within production domain only. But if you log in as tenancy admin, then you can create users in any domain, including the default domain. Now let's navigate to the main menu, click Identity and Security, and under Identity click Domains. Now select your production domain and click Users. And to create user, we will click on Create User and provide the name Saurabh Patil. Set the username as S. Patil and provide an email address. The domain admin set the requirement of email address in domain setting. If the primary email address required checkbox is selected, we must provide email ID. Otherwise, we can skip this. For now, it has been selected, so I need to provide the email address while creating the users. And then I will assign the user to the network admin group and click Create. Done. The user is now created and the activation link will be sent to the provided email address, where user can go to their mailbox and activate the account. For now, I will do it for that particular user. I open the mailbox and click Activate the account and set the password. I will do that quickly. Then I'll click on Reset. Then we have activated the account and updated the password. Now you can open new window and go to the sign-in page, cloud.oracle.com. Enter your tenancy name, select the production domain, and provide the username and password for the user that we just created. That is S. Patil and the password. And then click on Sign In. For first time, it will ask me to set up second factor for multi-factor authentication. I will do that quickly. And done. We are on the console. The user Saurabh Patil is logged in, but that user does not have access to any of the cloud resources or services, as we have not defined any permissions yet. But the user can manage their profile and perform self-service capabilities like updating their profile, resetting password, or setting email preferences. Now, let us explore how we can use CSV option to create multiple or bulk users in IAM. For that, I log out from the current user and log in as production domain admin. Once again, I will navigate to domains, select the production domain and click users. And this time, I will not click on create user, I will select more actions and click import users. First, you need to download a sample file to create your own CSV for import process. After downloading, open the file and edit users.csv. First, delete all demo data and then add the information for the users you want to create. To save some time on the demo, I have already created users.csv file, highlighting minimum required fields like user ID, last and first name, work and home email, and primary email type. Note that for the primary email type, valid values are home, work, and others. If you enter any other value, there will be an error and the input will not be successful. You can refer the documentation for more details. Save the file, go to the console and select your user.csv file and then click Import. You can check the status of user creation by clicking on the job ID. If the creation fails, you will receive the information on why the import did not succeed. In our case, users are created successfully. Now go to the production domain and click Users and you will see all the imported users. You can add them to the network admin and vault group as per our use case. For that, go to Groups, select the network admin group and select the user and click Assign Users to Group. Go back, select the vault admin group, select the second user and click Assign User to Group. Users can now log in with the new credentials and configure multi-factor authentication just like we did for the previous user. So to wrap up, in this demo, we have seen the process of creating users using console and CSV import option. This option is important when we want to create or import bulk users to the Oci Iam. And also we have seen how to add users to the groups. Thanks for your time. See you again. Administrator roles in Oci Iam, where we will explore why administrator roles are important and the permissions associated with each role within your identity domain. So let's get started. As we know, when we create an identity domain, along with that, we also create a domain admin. This domain admin is a super user for your domain and also has all super user privileges, which means they can manage users, groups, application, system configuration or security setting, and also actions related to audit and notification. And as a domain admin, you might want to share some of this responsibility with other users within your domain, like sharing user management permissions to a particular user or managing user-related capabilities in your domain, or assign someone as security admin to handle all security configurations for your domain. Now this is where we see the need of administrator roles, so that domain admin can do the delegation of admin roles to other users. And to address the same, now the Oci identity domain has predefined administrator roles, and it allows domain admin to assign specific role to other users. And as mentioned, these roles are predefined and come with a broad set of permissions for managing the identity domain and its components without the need to write any complex policy statement. Now let us quickly look at the available administrator roles and their associated permissions. Starting with Identity Domain Administrator. This role is for super user with access to all capabilities of that particular domain and responsible for delegation of roles to other users. Second, we have Security Administrator role. This role can manage system settings or security configurations and also manage password policies or sign-in policies. They can also handle authentication, multi-factor authentication, and identity providers in your domain. Then the Application Administrator role allows you to create, update, and manage applications, as well as it allows you to provide or revoke access for groups and users for any particular application. Then we have a role for User Management, where user administrator are responsible for managing users, groups, and their memberships in your domain, like creating, deleting users and groups and all related capabilities in your domain. We also have User Manager, who has limited permissions as compared to User Administrator role. You can assign them to manage all users or users from specific group, and they can handle various user-related capabilities including account updates, activations, deactivations, password resets, and more. Then we have a role for User Support, where Help Desk Administrator can manage user accounts, unlock them, and handle actions related to password reset, authentication factors, and bypass code. Following that, we have Audit role for generating or running reports for an identity domain and to keep a track of various activities. All these predefined roles apply to the users within that particular domain and provides granular access to applications and data planes integrated within the domain. They do not extend to the compartments, which makes them different from policy access management. Now, we will see some key points of utilizing administrator roles. With all predefined roles and well-defined permission, it is easy to manage your identity domain. All the roles are associated with the capabilities of your identity domain only. This linkage ensures that all the roles are relevant and specific to the context of your organization. One of the key benefits of administrative role is that they help you to simplify the delegation of tasks. Instead of navigating complex policies, you can assign roles to users, allowing them to perform specific duties without the need of understanding in-depth complex policy management. And finally, all the roles are aligned with best practices in cloud security, making your IAM more secure and efficient. So to conclude, administrative roles are effective method for managing and delegation of responsibilities within your domain. And it simplifies the access management, and most important, it is aligned with the best practices in the cloud security. I hope you found this feature useful. Thanks for your time to the demo on assigning administrator roles. I have logged in as one of the users we created in previous demo. And you will notice that this particular user do not have access to any cloud services or resources. Like if you can check VCN under networking, see authorization failed, means you do not have permission to perform any action. Same for compute instance, you do not have permissions. And you can also check with any other service, like I will select Vault. See, no access. Even the user do not have access to the capabilities within the identity domain. We can check that by navigating to domains, selecting production domain, and click on users. See, you are not allowed to perform any action. You can check with groups, same. Even you can check with security, you do not have any permissions. Now let's see what happens when we assign this user an administrator role. Like we will assign user administrator role. For that, I log out from this user and log in as domain admin. Select production domain, provide username and password, and click sign in. Now I go to domains, select production domain, and to assign roles, I need to go to security and click administrators. Here you can select the role you want to assign. In our case, I will select user administrator role. This role allows you to manage users, group and group membership within that domain. Click add user. Now select the user you want to be user admin and then click add user. Done. We have assigned Saurabh Patil as user administrator for production domain, who can create or delete users or groups and also assign or revoke group memberships. Now let us verify the changes. I go back to the user console to check the access. I go to the domains, under production domain, click on users, and you will notice that user got access to manage users within the domain and also groups and their membership. However, users still do not have access to other capabilities like security or notification. As we have only assigned user administrator role, only related permissions are given. That means user with this particular role as a user admin can manage users, groups and group memberships only. Similarly, we can assign or delegate admin roles to other users easily using this functionality without writing any single policy statement. But make a note, all the roles are limited to domains and the capabilities of domains only. So with this quick demo, we got to know how to delegate administrator roles in the identity domains. Also, we assigned user admin role to a particular user and then verified the access permission. Thanks for watching. See you again. In this lesson, we will learn how policies are used to manage permissions and authorization in OCI, where authorization gives granular permission to end users to access resources or services in OCI. It also controls things like what kind of permission a particular user has. And as a part of authorization, we write or set policies in OCI to provide role-based access control. Let's start by looking at how to write a policy. The syntax for writing a policy in OCI is shown on the screen. A policy has 4 key aspects. First, subject. that defines who is to be allowed. And then we have action for defining what action a subject can perform on resources. And with placement and location, we define scope of access for that particular subject. And to go more granular, we can use condition. Before going further, make a note that by default, everything is denied. Policies are designed to always start by allowing something. And there is no such thing as deny policy, as we follow the security principle of least privilege, which means that we only provide the minimum needed permission for an end user to perform their task. So always keep this in mind while writing policies. Now let's decode the policy syntax shown on the screen. First, we will start with subject clause. The subject clause is providing access to your principal actor. You can define subject in various ways, and we can start with the membership of registered groups inside domain. Like we know, group is a collection of users where we group users as per their roles or as per the company needs. So while we write a policy for group membership, we first write group as keyword, then give the domain name to which that group belongs, and then we write the group name. Let's take an example. Suppose you want to write a policy for network admin group in your production domain. Then the policy will look like what you see on the screen. For now, just focus on subject, where the group keyword is used and then domain name / group name. In similar way, you can write it for dynamic group. And dynamic group is basically used when you want to call a particular service from another service. For example, you want to allow group of compute instances to call object storage or vault service. So the policy will look like allow dynamic group and then the domain name / dynamic group name. You are not limited to go with the names only. You can use Oci as it is a unique identifier where you have to just replace the group name and dynamic name with Oci. You can also use a subject clause with something like any user, which means anybody who is a part of that tenancy can actually do something. And again, there are use cases where you want to use a subject like that. And if you have more than one group with the same set of permissions, you do not have to write multiple policies. You can change them like you see in this example, group domain name /a-admin, domain name /b-admin, and so on. This way, a single policy gets applied to multiple groups. One important point you should note is that when you do not prefix a domain name while writing the policy, as shown in the following example, then the default domain is implied. So you should always make a practice to prefix a domain name in a policy statement. Even if you are writing a policy for groups in default domain, you should prefix the default to the group name to make the policy statement more readable as shown on the screen. Now let us quickly look at action clause. Now in the action clause, basically we want to give you granular permissions. And behind the scene, these actions or permissions are nothing but API operations. But it becomes very difficult if we ask you to write a policy at every API operation level. So what we do is we group or bundle them into verb and resource pair. And using this way, it becomes a plain English kind of syntax, which make it much easier to manage and also much easier to understand. So what are the different level of verbs available? Well, it is inspect, read, use, and manage. And as you go down the hierarchy, the access level increases. And as you can see here in the description, for inspect, you can basically observe and monitor and do nothing beyond that. Where read means you have basic access, but not all the capabilities of that particular resource. Use means you can use the permission to modify the pre-existing resources. And with manage, you can basically do anything on the resource. Now let's see some permission examples to relate verbs in policy. If I have to give an example, when you say inspect object, you can learn about objects stored in buckets or detail about the object stored in bucket, like quantity or like if object exists or not, etc., etc., without getting the access to the object itself. But when you write a verb like read object, you are reading the content of the object. And when you say something like re-encrypt object, so you want to basically encrypt the object using different key version. So this is an example of use verb keyword, where we are performing some action on the pre-existing resources. And when you say create object, of course you are creating an object or deleting object, etc., etc. So in this case, we use manage verb to assign create permission. So these are the 4 different verb levels available, and they are consistent across all the resources within OCI. So what we have done, we have bundled all these permissions behind the scenes to give you the easy to understand and easy to syntax format. Now let's look at the second part of this action clause, which is basically the resource type. So what are resources? Well, again, to keep things simple, everything in OCI are resources. So if you say something like all resources, you are indicating that you are giving access to every resource within OCI. So you do not have to worry about new service getting added or missing out a particular service or some features. You just have to write all -resources, and all the resources in OCI are covered under it. This is the highest level of resource type available in OCI for permission management. And then we have this aggregate resource type and individual resource type. The idea here is each resource type is grouped into a family. Like compute has many features and capabilities, and storage has many features and components, and database, and so on. So instead of dealing with this individual resource type, you can deal with them at aggregate level. So if you say database family, you can actually write a policy at this particular level. And if you are not comfortable with aggregate or giving the permission to all the capabilities of that particular service, what you can do, you can go granular and select that particular individual resource type. Like for example, you can go ahead and say manage DB nodes, or you can say use databases. So you can go granular and select that particular individual resource type. You can see the same with instance family, object family, or volume family. But important thing to keep in the mind is that some resource type do not have an aggregate resource type. For example, identity resource itself. It does not have an aggregate resource type. So when you are dealing with identity, you have to write a policy on individual resource type. Let me quickly jump to the documentation and show you this in more detail. So in the OCI documentation page here, if you look at the core services, if I click networking, you can see there is an aggregate resource type available, which is virtual network family. But if you want to go granular, you can write policies at individual resource type. So like manage VCN or use subnet, or you can say read VCN. So you can go and use the individual resource type instead of going and using the aggregate level. By doing this, you are not giving a permission to all the components of that particular resource, but only the specific component. Similarly, if you go down and see for compute, you have aggregate resource type and the individual resource type available. And down below, if you click on block volume, you have the same structure. Same with databases. If you click and see, you have the same aggregate and individual resource type available. Now, the one that I want to show you is identity. When you look at identity, there is no aggregate resource type. So if you are dealing with identity and you want to write some policies against the identity component, you have to write policies at individual resource types. So keep that in mind, because it will be useful when you create admin and you want to give them permission, suppose to write policies or to create compartment or to manage users and group. So you need to give them permission at individual resource type level, because there is no aggregate resource type available for identity resource. Now coming back to our third component of the syntax, that is placement or location. So placement basically means where you are allowing your subject to perform actions. You can allow them to perform action in entire tenancy by saying in tenancy, or you can scope it down to a particular compartment. For compartment, you have two options. You can define compartment with name by saying in compartment and the name of the compartment, or you can use the OCID of the compartment by saying in compartment ID space the OCID of the compartment. So this is the structure how you can define the placement or location. Now let's see the example here where we are allowing our subject, that is network admin, to manage virtual family network in compartment sandbox. So we have scoped their permissions to a particular compartment sandbox. Similarly, you can give the compartment OCID by saying compartment ID and the OCID of the compartment. So in this way, we can use the placement to scope the assigned permission. So to wrap up, I hope you got to know how authorization and access control is done in OCI using policies. We now know the policy syntax, and in the syntax, we have subject clause to whom we assign permissions, and then we have action clause where we define verb and resource type to define the resource access, and then we have placement to scope the assigned permission. Also, we have seen the documentation to understand the aggregate resource type for some resources. So this lesson gave you an overall idea about authorization or permission management in OCI. Thanks for your time and happy learning. Welcome back. As we saw in the theory lesson, the permission or authorization is done through policies that define what someone is allowed to do in OCI. In this particular demo, we will see how to write policies and provide access to the resources in OCI. Now we are on the console, and for this demo, I have logged in as a tenancy admin, not as a domain admin, as we need to write policy statements. And we saw earlier, we have this default domain which get created when you create an OCI account. and we created another identity domain called production. If you click on it, we see that we have also created users and added them to the groups called network admin and vault admin. If you click on network admin group, you can see the users that belongs to this group. Now suppose we want the users in this group should be able to manage virtual cloud network in OCI. But now they cannot access that service as we have not set any permissions or written any policy statement to provide access to the VCN service. I'll quickly show you that. So I will log in as one of the user and show you the access permission. Open a new window. Enter the tenancy name. Now select the production domain and provide the username and password. Click on sign in. And now you can see I have logged in as John Rose in the identity domain production. Now if I go to networking and click on virtual cloud network and select the compartment, for now I can only see the root compartment and it gives me an error saying authorization failed. That is, I am not permitted to create or manage VCN service. Same is true with any other service. If you click on storage and select bucket, I get the same or similar error message that says you do not have authorization to perform this request. So it means I do not have permission to do anything in this account right now. So I quickly switch back to the admin account. And now we will write a policy that allows network admin group to access VCN service. As a result, all the members of this group will have access to the VCN service. And if you remember, policies are written outside the identity domain. So if I click on the policies, we can quickly go ahead and create a policy. We will name it as network admin policy and for network admin group. For now, I will place the policy in production compartment, and in the later lessons, we will see where to attach or place the policies. You can use the policy builder if you are not too familiar with the syntax, and it makes it much easier to write a policy. Like for network access, select an use case as network management, then select template for network admin to manage a cloud network, then select your production domain and group network admin and scope the permission limited to the production compartment. The policy statement is ready, which allows production domain network admin group members to manage virtual cloud network family, which means creating, deleting or updating all networking resources in the production compartment. And if you want to edit or use the manual option, click on manual editor and you can edit or add multiple statements. Now I will click create and a policy statement will be created to allow access to the VCN service. So I switch back to the John Rose account here and quickly refresh the console. I go to the networking and select virtual cloud network. Now the first thing you will notice here is I have access to the production compartment, which was not visible here. I select the production compartment and we see no error message now. But if you select root compartment, still you do not have permission, as we have set permission to manage VCN in production compartment only. So I will go ahead and create a VCN using VCN wizard. And for now, I'll give the name demo and keep all default values and click create VCN. And you can see VCN got created as the user is allowed to perform the action. So to wrap up, it was a quick demo where we authorize network admin group to access VCN by writing a policy statement. And in the policy, we allowed them to manage all VCN resources and then scope it to the production compartment. In similar way, we can write more advanced policies for every service, and you can go even more granular. So hopefully with this demo, you got to know how authorization or permission management is done in OCI using policies. Thanks for your time. See you again. Welcome to this lesson on compartments. Compartments are one of the unique components within OCI that help us to organize and manage our resources. And it is also useful in implementing access control. So let us learn more about compartments in this lesson. When you create or open an OCI account, you get access to a tenancy. It is also called as root compartment. Consider it is like a main folder in your computer where you place all your files and documents. Similarly, in OCI, we have this root compartment that can hold all your cloud resources. Like now, in your computer, you go ahead and create subfolders so that you can organize all your files properly. Similarly, in this root compartment, you can go ahead and create more compartments. For example, you can create a network compartment that will hold all the networking related resources. Or you can also create storage compartment to hold storage related resources. So now you must have got it. Just like folders, these compartments are logical container where you can keep all your related resources. Like you can see in this example, we have kept virtual cloud network and load balancer in compartment network. And similarly, block storage or file storage in compartment storage. It is not always compulsory to keep all the related resources in the same compartment. You can create compartments for your project or for a specific region or whichever way you want to organize. Like we have seen in our previous demo scenarios that we have created two compartments like production and development, so that all the resources related to the production team will be placed in the production compartment, and similarly with development team. So with this logical container, we can have collection of all the related resources, and along with that, we can isolate and implement access control. Now suppose someone want to keep all the resources in the root compartment without creating any subcompartment, they can do that. But it is a best practice to create dedicated compartment to isolate resources and properly manage them in your tenancy. Now going ahead, we will look at the features of the compartments so that we can utilize them in most efficient way. The first one is related to the resource compartment, where each resource belongs to a single compartment. That means a resource cannot be in the multiple compartments at the same time. For example, this virtual machine can be placed in compartment A but cannot be placed in compartment B simultaneously. So it is clear that every resource must belong to a specific compartment. Now the second one is about how we control access to the compartment or resources within that compartment. We have seen how we perform authorization for users to access resources, where we have a users belongs to a particular group and then we write a policy statement. In that policy statement, we specify the tenancy or a particular compartment. That means they can have access to the resources but within that compartment only. Like you can see in this example, we will allow a group to manage block storage but only in the compartment A. Now we will look at how resources interact. Like for example, in this scenario, we want this virtual machine to interact with virtual cloud network to get VNIC associated. So do we need both the resources in the same compartment? The answer is no. The resources can be in the different compartment and still they can interact with each other. So with this, we can isolate all virtual cloud network in one particular compartment and all our virtual machines in the different compartment, and still they can interact with each other. And then there is also a feature of moving resources. As you can see in this example, we can move resource from one compartment to another compartment. Suppose initially we had our virtual machine in compartment A, but due to some reason, if we need to move it to compartment B, we can do that. Next, we can also have resources from multiple regions in the same compartment because our compartments are global. So when you create a compartment, suppose you create it in your home region, let's say Phoenix, then the same compartment will be available in another regions where your tenancy is subscribed to. So for example, if you create an instance in the Phoenix region and you go ahead and create an instance in the Aspen region, you can place both of them in the same compartment. That is compartment A in this example. This is possible because compartments are global concept. Then there is also a concept of nested compartments, where compartments can be nested up to 6 levels deep, allowing you to create complex and structured environment. So for example, you might have a compartment for your project and then a subcompartment for each team working on that particular project. And going ahead, you might even need to have subcompartment for different requirements of each team. So with the nested compartment, you can map this logical hierarchy with your project framework. And with the nested compartment, you can also define granular access control. Like when you attach a policy to a particular compartment, you are defining who can access, modify, or delete that particular policy. We will explore this in the policy attachment lesson in more detail. So to wrap up, we got to know about the compartments and this logical container that can hold all cloud related resources in OCI. And also you got to know about the features of compartments and how they help you to organize, isolate, and secure your resources in OCI. I hope you found this lesson useful. See you in the demo. Hello and welcome to this demo on compartments. We have seen in the theory lesson that a compartment holds all our cloud resources. In this demo, we will explore the process of creating compartments and assigning resources to them, and also how to filter and explore all the resources within compartments. Now, as you can see, I am on the console. And to manage compartments, we will first navigate to Main menu, select Identity and Security, and click on Compartments. Here you can see all available compartments in your tenancy. If I click on this first compartment, you can see that this is the root compartment. And the root compartment is automatically created when you set up a tenancy in OCI. It is the highest level of compartment and contains all other child compartments. And as we know, it is possible to have all the resources in the root compartment. But we should create dedicated child compartment for better management of resources. For example, as you can see, we have this production compartment for our production team to hold all their cloud resources. Similarly for development team, you can go ahead and create compartments as per your needs. And to create a compartment, click on Create Compartment. Enter the name, Sandbox, Demo, and provide a short description. And then with this security zone, you can have Secure Compartment. So when you create or update any resources within your compartment, all your operations are validated and then only you have access to it. For now, we will skip this and go ahead and select the parent compartment. Here you select under which compartment this compartment should be created. Like if you select production compartment, then it will be created as a child compartment of a production compartment. And if you select root compartment, it will be a child compartment under root. For now, I will select root compartment and click on Create Compartment. Now if I refresh the page, you can see the compartment has been created. And the parent compartment is root compartment. You can create a hierarchy of child compartments under it, and this hierarchy can go up to 6 level deep. Now that we have created our compartment, we will explore how to allocate our resources within this sandbox compartment. For example, I will create a VCN and place it in this compartment. For that, I will go to Networking, click on Virtual Cloud Networks, and then I'll quickly create a VCN. Provide the name demo-01, and now we will select a compartment where we want to place this VCN. This ensures that we are doing proper resource mapping with compartment, and this mapping is 1-to-1, which means a resource can only exist within a single compartment at any given time. However, a compartment can hold multiple resources. In our case, we will select Sandbox Demo to place our VCN. Keep all other default values, click Next, and then click on Create. And now you can see our VCN got created. You can also use this particular scope or filter to view VCN resources in any compartment as per your access permission. But now if you want to explore all the resources in your compartment, you can use Tenancy Explorer. For that, you can go to Main menu, navigate to Governance and Administration, and click on Tenancy Explorer under Tenancy Management. And here you can select your compartment to view all the resources within it. Suppose I select sandbox compartment, you can see the VCN we created and all the related components of the VCN. We can also check with root compartment and see all the resources under root. You can select show resources in subcompartment option to view the resources of child compartments as well. And we can see production and sandbox compartment resources got added. So to conclude with this demo, we got to know how we can create compartments and assign resources to the compartments. And also we can explore all the resources of a compartment using Tenancy Explorer. I hope you found this demo useful. Thanks for your time. Welcome to this lesson on compartment quotas. In this lesson, we will explore how you can control resource consumption within compartments using quota policies. Let us consider a simple scenario where you want to control usage of high-value cloud resources in your tenancy. For example, you need to ensure that only 10 bare metal machine instances can be used across all 3 departments of your tenancy. And you want to add additional condition that your production team can use only 4 of them. So as an administrator, you can set compartment quota to limit or control resource consumption. By doing this, you have control over the amount of resources each compartment can consume. And to set this compartment quota to limit the resource consumption, we use quota policies. And here you can see the syntax for quota policy. We will take a simple example and then explore this policy syntax. Now suppose you want to set a quota policy where you want to allow only 4 virtual cloud networks to be created in your particular compartment. Let's say production compartment. So we start by using the action keyword set. After set keyword, we define the resource family or service family on which we want to set a quota limit. There are the keyword for each resource such as compute core, object storage or VCN and so on. You can refer the documentation to find service family name for each resource. For this example, I will select VCN and then we have this quota keyword and then we need to provide the quota name, which depends on the service family that you have selected previously. For VCN, we have VCN count or reserved public IP count. Now again, you can refer to the documentation to get the service family and all related quota names so that you can set quota policy for any resources as per your needs. Coming back to the policy, I will select VCN count. Then we need to provide the quota count. Like in our example, we want to set it as 4. You can enter any numerical value like 10, 40, 50. For now, I will select 4. And then we need to define the location where you want this policy to be applied in tenancy or in a particular compartment by providing compartment name. Let's say I will set it for production compartment. Now you can see this complete quota policy that has limited number of VCNs to 4 in the production compartment. Similarly, we can write a policy for any other service. For example, look at this policy. This policy limits the use of expensive resource such as Exadata to 1 across the entire tenancy. And the next policy you see on the screen set the limit of 10 cores for VM standard 2 and bare metal standard 2 compute series in your entire tenancy. You can also scope it down to a particular compartment. In addition to the set statement, we have 2 more quota policy types available. Like we have seen, set action keyword is used for setting resource quota limit. Then we have this unset keyword. It is used to unset quota limits back to the default service limit. That is, it will reset quotas for a particular resource back to the default service limit of your tenancy. And then we have 0 keyword to set quota value to 0, which effectively removes access to the resource in the specified compartment. Let us take one example to understand how to use 0 and unset actions to manage compartment quotas. If you look at the first line of statement, you can see that Exadata resources are set to 0 for entire tenancy, and we are using the wildcard in the place of quota name. By doing this, all Exadata resources will be considered. And then our second statement effectively creates exception for production compartment, where we are using unset to reset the quota for Exadata resources back to the default service limit. That means it has allocated all Exadata resources to the production compartment. In this way, we can use set keyword for setting resource quota limit, unset keyword to reset quota back to the default service limit, and 0 keyword when you want to remove access to the cloud resource. Next, you can also set limits on OCI spending using budgets on any particular compartment. For example, if you have allocated $2,000 per month for your production compartment for infra spending, you can set a budget for your compartment and set a threshold value. Then you can track the actual spending and receive alerts if you reach the defined threshold percentage. In this way, we can control our spending in our tenancy. So to conclude, now we got to know about compartment quotas and budgets and how to use them for limiting resource consumption within your tenancy. By setting compartment quotas using set, unset and zero, you can ensure that your resources are used efficiently. And also by setting spending limit, you can keep your budget under control. Thanks for your time. See you again. Welcome to this demo on compartment quotas and budgets. Before we start, we will first try to understand the difference between service limits and compartment quotas. So if you refer the documentation, you can see the clear difference. The service limits are set or predefined by Oracle, and compartment quotas are set by the administrator of your tenancy, allowing to control resource consumption within your tenancy. Now, if you want to know the universal service limits for each resource, you can refer to the official documentation. But if you want to know the service limits specifically for your tenancy, you can go to console under tenancy management. You can check it in limits, quotas and usage. Here you can select the service name for which you want to view the limits. For example, I will select Virtual Cloud Network. And for our home region, you can see the service limit for number of VCNs is set to 300. And if you check for any other region, this service limit may vary because services have different limits for different regions. Now, this is all about service limits. But if you want to limit resource usage or consumption, you can set up specific resource limits on any compartments using quota policies. These policies allow us to control the amount of resources a particular compartment can utilize. Here, you can get the syntax for setting up quota policy for that particular resource. Now, I will copy the syntax for VCN count and then we go to quota policies and click on create quota policy. Provide a name. I will give it as quota policy for security sandbox compartment. Provide the description and then we will write the policy statement. It is always a good practice to first zero down the service limit for a compartment using zero statement. And we have discussed this in the theory lesson. So the statement will be 0 VCN quotas in compartment security sandbox. And then we will set quotas using set statement. So here is the statement that we have copied and we will change the quota count to 1 and compartment to security sandbox. So this policy will first remove all access to our VCN resource in security sandbox compartment, and then it will set and ensure that this compartment can have only maximum of one VCN resource. Click create quota policy and quota policy is set for your compartment. Now we will verify the limit. For that, I will navigate to networking, click virtual cloud network, and then first I will ensure security sandbox compartment is selected and quickly create VCN using VCN wizard. I'll provide a name test01. Ensure the compartment is security sandbox. Keep all default values. Next, and click on create. You can see the VCN got created as we have set the limit to 1. Let's try to create another VCN in the same compartment and see if the quota limit is set or not. Again, I will provide the name test02, check the compartment and click create. And now you can see we got the error. Quota limit exceeded. Indicates that we can create only one VCN resource in security sandbox compartment. You can check with any other compartment which will allow you to create VCNs as per the service limit. But for security sandbox compartment, the limit is set to 1. So in this way, we can control resource consumption within compartments. Along with the quota policies, you can also set compartment budgets to further manage cost and monitor resource usage. Budgets help you to set soft limit on your OCI spending. And to set the budget for your compartment, you navigate to Billing and Cost Management and click Budgets under Cost Management. Click Create Budget, provide the name, Security, Sandbox, Budget. I'll keep the same description. Select the target compartment as Security Sandbox and then provide the amount that you want to set for target compartment. For example, I will just set a budget of $100. Then you can set the budget alert rule by defining the threshold value. Here you can define a threshold for actual spending or you can provide percentage. Suppose I enter 80%, which means we will receive an alert when our spending reaches $80. You can also configure event rules so that you can receive alerts from notification service, or you can provide the email ID to receive budget alert messages. So in this way, using budgets, you can stay informed about your spendings. So to wrap up, this was a quick demo where we saw how to set compartment quotas to control resource usage within your tenancy or in a particular compartment, and how to use budgets to track and monitor your spendings. I hope you found this demo helpful. Thanks for your time.